Hello everyone, so this is a follow-up video on the last video on how to do your to the image trace and create a simple animation using Photoshop. But this is just a video on going over simple functions of Photoshop. So let's create a new file. And actually I don't need this. So if you create a file, this is what you're going to see with the Adobe Photoshop. So here you have this color panel and here properties and layers. So the Photoshop, like I mentioned, is really similar to the Adobe Illustrator because it is made by the same company. So only thing that is different is that, like I mentioned, is the vector and the raster. So raster image is much easier to understand because there is something very similar to what we do if we were to just take an oil paint and then start painting on the piece of canvas. So one of the things that most important when it comes to the Photoshop is how to use the brush tool. So brush tool is located right here. And if you start painting, actually you have to assign the color. If you start painting on a layer, it's gonna actually bake that color into that canvas. Whereas in the Illustrator, it was more like computer generated graphic floating on top of canvas. But here, the color is baked into these pixels, meaning that there is nothing you can't really move these elements around unless if you make it on a layer that is on top of the background. So if I do this, you will be able to move around, but still within this layer you cannot move created elements. So that is one of the big difference between the Photoshop and Illustrator. So here, if you want to move this, you're gonna have to erase it with the eraser. So eraser tool is located right here. So right click, I'm gonna select the eraser tool, and then I'm gonna erase it. Voila, simple, right? Just like how you draw with like a pencil and a paper. So in brush tool right here, if you click top left corner here. Excuse me, you can change the size of the brush stroke and the hardness of the brush stroke as well. So we kind of briefly mentioned about this when I was going over the eraser tool. But here, if you crank the hardness 100%, it's going to create this really crisp edges. So if I draw something, is going to create these sharp lines. But whereas if I were to crank down the hardness all the way down and then make like a brush like this, I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger. It's gonna create this kind of soft stroke and line quality. So I'll make it a little bit smaller. And so you notice the difference. So that is the simple basic of the softness, the hardness of the brush tool. So fastest way to adjust this is just right click with the brush tool selected, right click anywhere, and it's going to prompt open this control panel. So that is how you can use the brush tool in Photoshop. But here there's a lot of different types of the Photoshop brush tools, brushes. So you can also play around with these as well. So for instance, if I have this, I start painting, it's gonna have this kind of a different brush quality. But here, this is not a digital painting class, this is more a digital design class. We're gonna stick with these two mostly. So let's just erase this around. So for this assignment, I want you to create some kind of doodle, but something a little bit more elaborate than doodle, but not as serious an artwork. I'm not sure if you get what I'm trying to say, but make sure that you implement the layers as well. So I'm gonna create a layer, and then I'm gonna start creating like different lines and things like that. So I'm gonna use this kind of a red, kind of flat red right here, and I'm gonna go to swatches, and then go to the pastel. You can choose any kind of color swatches that you want. So I'm gonna use the pastel, Then let's select this color right here. The brush, Using the sharp brush, I'm gonna start creating this kind of a line. So if you click one area right here and hold down the shift and then click the second point, it's gonna create a straight line. So this is very useful it's very useful when you're using the Photoshop. I tend to use it a lot, but I'm not sure if you're going to use it or anyway. But if you were to create a straight line with the Photoshop, especially with the mouse, it's really hard. But if you just click, hold down the shift, drag it all the way down, it creates this really nice straight lines. So I'm gonna start creating like a different composition. So for the layer 1, I'm gonna start. So like I said, just create your own design. It doesn't have to look exactly like this, but I want you to implement different types of the size variation of the brush strokes and also the hardness of the brush as well. I'm gonna create some kind of design like this, and on top of the layer I'm gonna select like an orange, like, and then I'm gonna start creating a little bit softer brush. But here I'm gonna lower the opacity to 50%. Notice what it does. So if I lower the opacity, it is the transparency of the brush stroke is applied, and it creates something looking like this. I think that's kind of neat, so I'm gonna keep on working with that. Maybe smaller. Here, just introducing different. Notice if I stack up these two brush, it gets a little bit darker because it has that opacity setting on. And I'm gonna create another layer. I mean, this is just kind of a simple doodle that I'm doing. Still, I want you to be, I want you to play around with different kind of a brush, then create your own design with them. Here, I'm still on opacity. I'm gonna crank up the opacity to 70%. And brush a little bit smaller like this. That. This. Like this. Alrighty, and create another layer, something green, brush, here 70%, opacity 70%. I'm gonna lower the opacity to 20% because green is kind of a harsh color compared to all these oranges. So I'm gonna make it a little bit harder. Play around to create a different kind of a composition. I'm just creating this random, completely, I'm doing everything so arbitrarily, but at the same time kind of using my artistic subconscious of placing things here and there to create a composition of my own. And yeah, I feel like I needed some kind of a kicker color, so let's do that. Hard brush. Here I'm gonna give it a 100% opacity because I want this to work as some kind of kicker, meaning that it creates like a emphasis within the composition. Oh my god, I hate this. Okay. Alright. That's kind of cool. Alright, so I want you to play around. It doesn't have to look like this, I just wanted to create something like this. So just play around the brush tool and then create a simple like a doodle or drawing or painting, whatever you want to call it, design, using the brush tool. And also I want you to explore the power up eraser tool as well. So I could erase things like looking like this and create this kind of emphasis within the your lines, just to make it more interesting. Here, somewhere there. Here is going to be kind of difficult, but something like this too. And also I can do the same thing to here. No. So I want you to create your own design using using this kind of a technique. Oh, that's kind of cool, isn't it? That. This. Yeah, so it goes the same way. So by using this eraser tool, I could create a very interesting position. So I want you to explore the paint tool and the brush tool and eraser tool to create any simple composition. Something like this. It doesn't have to look exactly like this, but something your own creation. So just play around. It's gonna take some time to fully understand like how things works and things like that. So if you have any questions, you know where to reach, find me. And yeah, so just shoot me an email and I'll be able to help you out with that. And also, if you have not, I think you all submitted the project of final design for the project. So I'm gonna, well, I already talked about this in the agenda video, right? Yeah, I did. So all right, I'll see you guys later.